From the tales of lesser-known knights, dragons, and fairies. Bah, the dragon! This is the story of a dragon, ancient and fierce. It's also the story of two knights and a beautiful young woman, and how they met the dragon. One fine spring day, a very brave knight was riding in a lovely green land. In some places, this knight was known as the White Knight. In others, the Silver Warrior. In one kingdom, he was even known as Steve, but in this land he was often mistaken for Sir Lancelot. The knight came upon a small village on the edge of a forest, and the village had a terrible tale to tell. "Oh, Sir Knight, do not go into the forest," said the villagers. "Why not?" said the knight. "Why, because this forest is the home of the ferocious Dark Knight," said the villagers. "He defeats all who enter the forest, and he would surely defeat you," said the villagers. The knight was somewhat irked at the villagers' lack of faith, although in defense of the villagers, the knight was covered in travel dust and did not look quite as mighty as usual. The knight said, "I will go into the forest, and I will fight this Dark Knight, and I shall surely defeat him." "Show me the road into the forest," said he, and since there was only one road into the forest, this was quickly done, and off the White Knight rode. Now the Dark Knight was in his forest home, and as he often did when he was home, he was sharpening his weapons. The Dark Knight was a ferocious warrior, and he was also known in many lands. In some places he was the Black Knight, and in others the Goth Warrior, and in one land he was even known as Bruce. The White Knight made his way along the forest road, and soon enough he rode up to the Dark Knight. "Hail, Dark Knight!" shouted the White Knight. "I am here to defeat you and clear the way through the forest, so the travelers may pass unharmed." Now the Dark Knight, who wore black armor, was really not as bad as what the villagers had made out. In fact, he had once been a great champion. He kept to himself, except when he saw the villagers littering in the woods or cutting too much wood. Then he chased them off. The Dark Knight looked on when the White Knight rode up. "I accept your challenge," said the Dark Knight, "but first take your ease, have some water, and we will talk a while." So the knights spoke of knightly things, such as horses and swords, great battles and great deeds, and they talked about the weather too, until the Dark Knight said, "Let us mount up and joust, and if unhorsed we will continue our battle on foot." The White Knight never thought much about his prowess with lance and sword, but he was one of the most gifted fighters of his time. In fact, he had never been knocked off his horse. He had once unhorsed the mighty Gawain, who claimed his horse was distracted by a squirrel. He defeated the fierce Sir Bors, who complained that the sun was in his eyes, and he even bested the previously undefeated Galahad, who said he had swallowed a bug while charging, and that's why he fell off his horse. But never before had the White Knight faced someone quite like the Dark Knight. In front of the Dark Knight's forest home there was a sunny meadow, the perfect place for a brawl between two powerful opponents. The knights mounted and rode to opposite ends of the field. At once they charged, each bellowing a war cry. The horses' hooves flung up dirt. The noise of the charge was like thunder. Then crash! The knights collided, and something happened that had never happened before. The mighty White Knight was knocked off his horse, but so was the Dark Knight. At this point in most stories, the two knights would jump up and charge each other while swinging their swords, but I can tell you that after bouncing off the hard ground in their heavy armor, both knights were kind of woozy. The two horses wisely wandered off to find some nice grass, while the knights stumbled around dizzy. After a minute or so of catching their breath, each warrior grabbed their favorite hand weapon. For the White Knight, this was a heavy warhammer, and for the Dark Knight, it was a massive spiked mace. The two knights rushed at each other and began trading blows. Soon the woods were ringing with the sound of metal smashing on metal, like a blacksmith hammering a twisted piece of iron. Finally, swinging their weapons with all their might, each knight smashed the other in the head, and both fell unconscious to the ground. A short while later, both knights woke up and agreed that it had been the best fight of their lives. The Black Knight said, "Where did you learn to joust like that, White Knight?" And the White Knight said, "There are many opportunities to joust out in the world while doing deeds of knightly goodness and daring." The Black Knight said, "Perhaps I should leave this forest and go forth and do deeds of knightly bravery as well." To this the White Knight agreed, and with that the two knights, who were now friends and comrades in arms, parted ways, one going north and the other west. Just about the time the two knights were fighting, something was stirring in the land of Dante. The land of Dante was a strange and terrible place to most people. It had bubbling mud pits, sulfur gas spewing from vents in the earth, rivers of lava flowing their way downhill, strangely shaped rocks, and caves, many, many caves. Most thought Dante was the worst place in all the lands, but there was one who thought Dante was a wonderful place, the best place in the wide world. And that one was the mighty dragon. Bah! Actually, there were some feral geologists that kind of like the land of Dante, too. As I'm sure you know, dragons come in many shapes and sizes and like to live in many different kinds of places. Some dragons swim and live in the ocean. Some crawl and stay in deep caves and dark woods. There was a dragon, a friend of Ba's, who lived in a lake in a land just a ways away from Ba's home in Dante. Ba was one of the ancients from the mightiest race of dragons. Ba could fly, and when he flew, his wings made a sound like an autumn gale. When Ba breathed fire, it was like a heat wave from a live volcano. Ba's bumpy, thick hide was black from fire and ash. Ba had talons and teeth like great curved swords. All who saw Ba ran in terror, although he could never understand why, for Ba never attacked people, and when he needed to feed, he always made sure he stole the king's cattle and pigs and no one else's. Ba would sleep, sometimes for months or even years in one of the mud pits. Then, when hungry, Ba would fly over the rich kingdom next door to the land of Dante and would take his meals from the king's herds beyond the castle. If Ba had not been hungry for a while, then the king's herds would be fat and rich, and Ba would feast while the king's knights rode hither and yon, making occasional charges at Ba. Then Ba would flap his great wings and would fly into the air with his meal in order to have it in a quieter place. Now it just so happened that at the same time the Silver Warrior and the Dark Knight were about to joust, Ba was rising from a sleep of many months. After a good stretch and a very loud roar, Ba decided to fly up and check on the king's cattle. As it turned out, the cattle were fat indeed, and Ba was able to get his fill with a minimum of having to roar at nights and breathe fire around while trying to miss them. After his nice feast, Ba, as was his way, decided to fly around for a bit to see what had changed in the world while he was asleep. Ba had not gone very far when he saw something no dragon can resist. Treasure. All people know that no dragon can resist treasure, but what is known only to dragon scholars is that for every dragon, treasure can be different, and their idea of treasure can sometimes be very strange. For example, there was once a dragon who treasured funny-looking trees, so whenever he saw a funny-looking tree, he would drag it up and fly it back to his cave. There was another dragon who treasured beer casks, and he would chase villagers away from their pubs so he could roll their beer casks into his lake. There was even a dragon that collected needlework and tapestries from the walls of the many castles she breached. Ba, on the one hand, was a pretty regular dragon. He liked rocks that glittered and other shiny things, but Ba was a little unusual in that he also treasured and liked to collect stories. Ba, in his very long life, had collected stories from dragons and elves, from trolls, and from the little folk, from the others, and even from a few people. On this day, Ba was flying over the kingdom when he spied a treasure, and this day that treasure was a young woman with a great amber necklace, lovely long red hair, green eyes, a highly polished lute, and a beautiful singing voice. The young woman's name was Bryn, and what Ba was to later learn was that Bryn was the daughter of a local famous bard. A bard, as you know, is a type of storyteller, and funnily enough, her dad's name was actually Bard, so he was Bard the Bard. Bryn had been walking along and singing the funny tale of the knight, the jester, and the scribe who all walked into a tavern. When Ba, hearing her wonderful voice and the funny story, swooped down and scooped Bryn up. Bryn was at first quite startled, but being a brave and resourceful young woman, she soon began to speak with Ba. Sir Dragon, if I may ask, where are you taking me? Young woman, said Ba, I am taking you to the land of Dante. And why are you taking me to that dread land? Sir Dragon asked Bryn, who was by nature very polite and quite fearless. Why, Dante is a wonderful place, said Ba, surprised that she would call it a dread land, and I am taking you there so that I may hear your stories, for I am a collector of stories. And with that, Ba increased his speed, and soon the noise of his passage made speech impossible. Bryn, being taken by Ba, was the topic of much discussion in the taverns and markets in the kingdom. A roving band of feral geologists had seen Ba land safely with Bryn in the land of Dante. It was known that she was safe and sound, but what Ba's plans were for Bryn were unknown. As it turned out, Bryn was having a very interesting time. Ba was a very old being, and he knew thousands of songs and stories. A dragon never forgot anything, and Ba, being very intelligent, had been interested in many things during his long life. Being much younger, Bryn had fewer stories and songs than Ba, but her wonderful singing voice, which was much better than Ba's singing voice, and her dramatic flair for storytelling, charmed and enthralled Ba. Dragons can sometimes glamour people, and Ba had woven a very subtle charm spell into his stories to keep Bryn happy and interested in her captivity. Some call this the dragon whammy. What Ba did not know was that human women have their own ancient magic. Bryn wanted to get home to be with her father and friends. And as she told her tales, she filled them full of feelings for family and home. The fierce Ba soon felt strange stirrings of loneliness in his heart. So Ba and Bryn each told stories, weaving spells upon the other, and learning much upon the way. And this was how things stood when, quite by accident, the Silver Warrior and the Dark Knight met at the border of the land of Dante. Now you may remember that when our two knights parted, one went north and the other went west, and it should not seem that they would meet, especially since Dante is to the south. But in those days of the world, paths were often crooked, and people were guided as much by destiny as by the direction of the sun and moon. "Hail and well met, Bruce!" shouted Steve when he saw the Black Knight. "Hail and well met, Steve!" called the Black Knight when he saw Steve. Although the knights happily battled each other when they had first met, they now considered themselves fast friends and were very pleased to see each other. Both knights in their travels had heard the tale of the ferocious dragon Ba and his lovely captive Bryn, and they soon had plans in place to battle the dragon and rescue the young woman. Ba spied the knights from a long way off. He put Bryn in his favorite cave and rolled a large rock across the entrance. Bryn could see out, but she could not escape her impromptu prison. Ba then flew to the top of a hill, spread his wings, and let go his loudest, most fiery, scariest roar. Then, as was the custom of the time, the combatants started with a little trash talk. "I am Ba the Terrible," roared Ba. "100 mighty champions I have defeated, and 11 great wounds I have taken. Neither man, nor troll, nor giant, nor dragon can defeat me," boomed Ba in his great dragon voice. "Flee for your lives and do not return to the land of Dante." Now the two warriors were quite impressed by Ba's trash talk, but they didn't show it. "I am the Silver Warrior," thundered Steve in his battlefield voice. "I have fought battles and duels beyond number. From the West Sea to the East Sea and beyond, I yield to no man or beast. Fly now, Ba, and thank us for our mercy." And the Black Knight, who was a man of few words, shouted, "I am Bruce, of the Order of the Black Armor, and we have never retreated. Enough talk, Ba! Flee or fight!" Now it was Ba's turn to be impressed. The Order of the Black Armor was known to Ba, as their deeds were famous, as was the Silver Warrior. But Ba also didn't show he was impressed. He also figured the knights were scared. How could they not be? and were just doing a good job of hiding it. What Ba could not know was that the two knights approaching were not scared, as these were not your everyday run-of-the-mill knights. No, these battle-hardened, fight-tested warriors were two of the greatest fighting men of their time, and they were about to become Ba's greatest challenge. Quickly the knights separated and rode hard at Ba from different directions. Ba rose, breathing fire, but the knights had planned for this. They dodged the flames, pulled their bows, and fired arrow after arrow at Ba. The arrows passed through the thin leather of Ba's wings, something dragons want to protect at all costs. Ba quickly flew down and plunged into the safety of a deep mud pit. Again the knights were ready. Steve jumped off his horse and began lifting and hurling huge boulders into the pit, while Bruce charged up the hill to the cave where Bryn was. "Sir Knight, you will never move this rock," said Bryn, "for it was placed by the mighty Ba." "Young miss," said Bruce, "I shall move this rock or my heart will burst from trying." Now the rock was actually much easier to move than what Bruce let on, for he simply used his lance as a lever and rolled the rock downhill. Ba, irritated at being pummeled by the boulders thrown by Steve, decided to make another foray. He rose out of the pit, skin smoking, fire in nostrils, and with an angry roar. It was his bad luck that right then the rock rolling downhill smashed him full in the chest, knocking him backwards and causing him to expel his load of fire into the sky. Ba was now forced to fight on the ground, tooth and claw against armor, warhammer, and mace. Each time he reached for one knight, the other would strike or club him. Ba's thick hide mostly protected him, but the blows of the knight hurt, and Ba had not been challenged like this in a very long time indeed. Ba then saw that Bryn was free of the cave and was coming down the hill towards the fight. He knew Bryn would get as close to the fight as possible to witness the event and make a suitable song. The problem was Ba had taken quite a liking to Bryn, and he knew if this battle continued, she may get mixed up in it. So Ba decided that this day could go to these brave knights, and off he flew. Many things happened in the next few weeks. The Black Knight and Bryn got married. At the reception, Bard sang Bryn's wonderful tale of the dragon, the knights, and the lady. Ba sent a very pretty rock as a wedding present. The Black Knight became the king's champion, and the Silver Warrior, after spending some time with Bruce and Bryn, went off on his next knightly adventure. As for Ba, he decided the next time he was hungry, he would fly to the ocean and eat some fish.